Hello, welcome back to everyone that's tuned into our channel. Welcome to the American Ultra Stocks. This is the first segment of the MLS Match Week recap. MLS is underway, lots of storylines for this season. We got it started over there with Inter Miami, and we had a lot of promising players, promising international players for the US, hopefully. They had a good first week. So, Braden, take it away.
I feel like most of the time the season would be kicked off with the MLS champion, but of course it's a special scenario. They did kick it off on Saturday, but had to start the season with Inter Miami, get as many games of them in as possible, just bring in the money. But yeah, I think this game kind of showed some light on how Miami are maybe not as good as we all would have thought. They're still a very good team. They have lots of individual quality, but there's definitely ways to break down this team, and it showed. They looked very tired towards the end of the second half. RSL had a lot of chances in the game that they just couldn't convert on. Callender ended up getting a couple of saves, a clean sheet, but I think a more polished or a better team would have won that game from RSL's perspective. Maybe if it was mid-season, they win that game. Maybe if it was just a better team, one of the top contenders in MLS, they would have won. But I think there's some real holes that we're showing from Inter Miami. Julian Gressel looked lost, honestly. I don't know why he's playing as a center midfielder. That's not his position. He should be a wing back. But Yedlin's already in that position. Not really sure what he's doing out there, but he was probably a big mistake going for him instead of someone like Miles Robinson in the offseason, who would have been a huge impact on their defense. One thing I will say is their counterattack with Messi, Suarez, and Diego Gomez was lethal. Suarez is not a counterattacking player anymore, but he did well to get the ball to Diego Gomez, get the assist in his MLS debut. And you can tell, like I said, Inter Miami has so much individual quality, but I think it's going to be all about managing their minutes. Suarez going the full 90, only getting subbed off at the end of the game, was just a really weird decision for me. I mean, you can tell he's limping every game, every time he takes a step. He's clearly in a lot of pain, and in a game like that, when you're up 2-0, you have Campana on the bench, there's really no need to keep Suarez in.
Yeah, I think that tired legs is going to be the theme for this Inter Miami season. Let's not forget that there's the Copa America and Olympics in the summer. There's guys like Redondo that will be going there. So I don't know. I think they might struggle a lot more than what people think. I agree with you. Now, moving on to the current champions. Now, exactly how it should be on the norm. The Crew, they hosted Atlanta. And what do you think, Braden? Both of these clubs made a bit of moves. Atlanta has a lot of different faces around. What do you think?
I think it was a pretty straightforward win for the Crew. They started the season just as they left off, winning MLS Cup. Pretty straightforward 1-0 home win. It could have been more, honestly. Cucho missed a penalty. Brad Guzan making a good save. The fact that he started for Atlanta over Josh Cohen is extremely frustrating to me. He did save the penalty. Like I said, it was a good penalty save. I'll give him props for that. But Cucho's goal that he did score in the first half was completely on Guzan. The ball just went through his hands, and Cucho just had to tap in. So, Atlanta, please start going. It's time to move on from Guzan. I know he's a club legend for them, and he's been good in the past, but his time is long gone. Please play Cohen, because he's had potential to be around the USMNT space for a couple of years now, especially going back to his performances with Maccabi Haifa. It'd be nice to see him get another chance, which he hasn't really had recently. And another takeaway for me, the two Olympic eligible guys in this game that stood out. Aiden Morris, he's always so good for the Columbus Crew, but whenever he tries to translate it to the national team or the Olympic team or anything like that, it just doesn't work for him for whatever reason. So I'm just kind of wondering when he's going to finally translate his good performances in MLS to a bigger stage, the national team, in the Olympics if he makes the roster, or maybe a move to Europe. He's basically completed MLS. He's won 2 MLS Cups already. So it's time to make a move to Europe, I think, challenge himself. And then from an Atlanta perspective, Caleb Wiley, he showed a lot of promise initially when he broke onto the scene, replacing George Bello after he went to Europe. But he's been very underwhelming now to start off this season and last season as well. It's a little disappointing, especially from someone who had hopes to be a starting left back or even in the roster at the Olympics. And I think there's been a lot of players who have overtaken him.
Yeah, I completely agree, especially on Morris. I feel like if he doesn't make a move this summer, he's on the run to be the next Jackson Ewell, honestly. It's unfair to say that, but it's time for him to move on. Let's hope that he can get kicked on. We will need him in the Olympics. He's important for that defensive depth. Now, moving on to the game that was played nearest to me, LAFC hosting the Seattle Sounders. The Seattle Sounders have made a really nice marquee signing, but ultimately they did falter here in LA. What are your main takeaways on that game here on the West Coast, Braden?
Honestly, as much as I hate LAFC, there's no shame from the Sounders' perspective losing 2-1 to them in Los Angeles. It's a very good home atmosphere for LAFC. I will say that they have some of the best fans in the league, looking more like a South American or Mexican atmosphere than most other teams in the league. It was pretty even, though. I think the Sounders had a lot of chances to stay in this game, but I think ultimately individual quality did win it for LAFC. Denny Bouanga was just having his way with whoever he went up against the whole game. He just showed why he is a former MLS MVP, I believe. He's such a good player. Honestly, I'm surprised he didn't leave in the January window because he's definitely good enough to go back to Ligue 1. But him staying is going to be huge for LAFC this season. And Mateus Bogues with one of the goals of the match day. I mean, it's kind of the average MLS goal, as the joke goes. There's so many bangers scored in this league. But just absolutely beautiful curling effort into the triangle at the top corner. Just so good. Such good technique. Tim Tillman as well continued his Camp Cupcake momentum from January into the season with a goal. I thought he was one of the best players in that underwhelming game for the USMNT, if you can call it the USMNT. And I guess starting the season with a goal, which is something he usually doesn't do. So maybe it could be a bit of a breakout season for him. From the Sounders' perspective, Pedro de la Vega already looks exciting, scoring a goal, of course, from a penalty spot. It's going to be exciting to see when he does make his debut as a starter, his full debut. I think he's going to be one of the key players for them this season. Obviously, like you said, the marquee signing. And from a USMNT perspective as well, the Josh Atencio, Obed Vargas duo in midfield, both Olympic eligible. Atencio was with the USMNT in Camp Cupcake. I think it's going to be one to watch if they can both keep their spots.
Yeah, and you mentioned this game. You started your take talking about the atmosphere. That's a perfect transition to the next game. Charlotte, props to them. Honestly, a new club, let's say relatively young, and the atmosphere was amazing, and their deserved win over the New York City FC. The trend is the same for New York. They just start losing on the same trend as last year. But any main takeaways, anything that surprised you in this one?
I will say having a stadium, an NFL stadium, doesn't hurt, but the fans did show out, 62,000 going strong, and it was exciting. I mean, the fans always show out for Charlotte's first game of the season. It was the same last season as well for them, and they got off to the perfect start, a very early goal, and just kind of coasted to a win. NYCFC had some half chances here and there, but really it was all Charlotte here at home. Dean Smith already looks like he's too good of a manager for MLS, which I think we all probably could infer heading into the season. He should be back in England relatively soon after doing a good job with this Charlotte FC team. Matthew Freese, the goalkeeper from NYCFC, kept them in the game. 4 saves, really good saves, including a penalty on Kerwin Vargas as well to keep them in it. Unfortunately, their young players, Julian Fernandez, Titus Magno, Johan Mijatovic off the bench, Monsef Bakar, they just can't really click right now. They have a lot of potential. Obviously, those players all 20, 21, 18, so much potential for the future, but they just can't seem to click right now. I think it's going to take some time for them to get it going, build some chemistry. Mid-season, they could be all right, but honestly, I think they're still struggling from the loss of Tati Castellanos from a couple of years ago. They still haven't replaced him. The young Serb, Johan Mijatovic, like I mentioned, he could be that guy. He was a marquee signing from Red Star Belgrade, I believe. So maybe he could be that guy, but I'm not sure. And then the last bit of positive note to take away from this game, the 16-year-old newly turned a couple days ago, Nimfasha Berchimas, making his debut for Charlotte FC. He's rated very highly from everyone at USSF, all the USMNT fans as well, and Dean Smith as well, the manager of Charlotte FC, rates him highly. I heard that he was in consideration to even start this match, and I think he will be starting a couple of games going on to the season. I think he's going to have a huge role for them off the bench and just continue to show why he's one of the top prospects we have.
Absolutely, he definitely is, and that's a good plug to the video that we just made recently. The top 10 MLS prospects. It's going to be in the description as well. We tried to add some highlights for all of the players there. And one of those players was actually involved in the next match is a player for DC United, Christian Fletcher. But the DC United in our capital, they hosted the New York Revs, who also have some of the other most promising players that we have on the roster. We also have a fraud, an English fraud in there. But regardless, straight to the game, 3-1 to DC United with possibly, I think it was the ugliest. I don't know if it's the worst, but the ugliest hat trick of all time. All tap-ins, but anyways, what are your main takeaways on this match, Braden? Benteke with the hat trick.
That's exactly how I was going to start it off. Christian Benteke, the former Crystal Palace striker, coming in and scoring the worst hat trick I've ever seen. Goals are goals, but the goalkeeper and the defense for the Revs just showing MLS quality, to be honest, defending. This is MLS heritage. But yeah, a good start to the season for DC. Like you mentioned, Christian Fletcher, a lot of their young guys, I think their attack's going to be very interesting this season. They do have the veteran Benteke, but on the wings, you got Olympic eligible Americans like Fletcher, Ted Kuja-Pietro, Jackson Hopkins, and the striker as well, Jacob Morel, who's only 19. He's injured right now, but once he comes back, the rotation for them is going to be something to watch. And then from a Revs perspective, like you said, Esmir Baraktarovic just continues to impress. I thought he was one of the lone bright spots, as well as Carlos Gil's wonder goal for the Revs. I think him starting just shows a vote of confidence that's very deserved. He's going to be one of their best players this season. And like you said, the English fraud, Noah Buck, an absolute disaster pass from him. I can't believe he thinks he's good enough for England. His competition for the midfield spots at the England U19s, Kobbie Mainoo and Jack Hinchelwood are balling in the Premier League, and this guy is putting up stinkers in MLS. Who does he think he is? He's not good enough for either national team at this point. So justice for him, karma for betraying his country, and hopefully it continues for the rest of the season.
Yeah, if somehow he finds that he had a great grandpa in Bermuda someday, he might make it to a national team. But moving on to the next match, there was Orlando and Montreal, one of the 0-0 games. Pretty boring, I think. This one, there's not much to take away if you're from an outsider, but if you follow these teams, there are a lot of movements during the transfer window. So what do you think, Braden? Main takeaways on this match?
Orlando are going to be one of the teams to watch this season. Like you said, they have a lot of new signings. Luis Muriel in particular is going to be huge for them up top with Duncan Maguire. It'll be interesting to see what they do with their formation because they do only play with one striker. Will they switch it up to accommodate both Maguire and Luis Muriel, or will they have them battle it out kind of like last season with their former DP Erkan Kara and Duncan Maguire? Maguire ended up taking his spot. Kara left. I think it could be a similar situation this season with Muriel taking Maguire's spot and then him leaving to the championship like he was supposed to in January, finally getting that move in the summer. I think that's what's going to happen. But while they are both still here, they're going to be an exciting duo to watch, whether they're on the field at the same time or not. Orlando has a lot of new additions, and I think it's just similar to NYCFC. It's going to take them a little bit of time to build some chemistry, but I do think their ceiling is very high this season. They're one of my sleeper picks to actually win MLS Cup if they can finally get it to click. Montreal as well, a new addition, Matthias Kokoro. He got in a lot of good positions for them, had some chances, but he does need to work on his finishing, especially with MLS legend Josef Martinez waiting on the bench to potentially take his spot. The only other thing I could think of to mention, George Campbell, the Olympic eligible American center back. He's been called up to one of the Olympic camps. He was all right. I think he was pretty solid defensively. He needs to work on his distribution, but we have other center backs for that in the pool, like Brandon Craig, Max Dietz. A pretty solid showing from him, but like you said, 0-0, probably the most boring game of the match day.
Yeah, it's a bit of a contrast in the next one. 2-2, Philly, your club. Braden, they tied at home. What are your main takeaways as a fan and from an unbiased perspective as well? What can you take away from this match, and what does it set up for the seasons for Philly and Chicago Fire?
The main takeaway, not only from this match, but from the start of the season in general, both legs against Deportivo Saprissa and the CONCACAF Champions League have now been finished. As we're recording, Quinn Sullivan looks like a completely new player. He switched positions. He was kind of a utility player before, playing cam sometimes, striker a lot. he didn't really have a role in the team, just kind of came off the bench sporadically, but now he shifted into the midfield diamond, playing on the right side of that, which allows him to get wide a lot, but also control the midfield at times, and he's looked very, very good. Probably our best player this season. So many goal contributions and starting the goals. He had the assist for the first goal and had a beautiful Trivela to start the great team goal that was the second goal, the stoppage time equalizer. And similarly, from the Fire's perspective, they're a young talent. Brian Gutierrez, what a game from him as well. Scored an absolute golazo, dribbling through half of the Union defense and scoring from outside the box. Absolute screamer. And getting an assist as well to put the Fire up late in the game. They ultimately did bottle the win, but a great game from him. And it'll be interesting to see his national team future as well, because he is eligible for US and Mexico. I know both fan bases really want him to play for them, despite lack of communication from both national teams. Honestly, I think he's been snubbed for some call-ups from both sides. But both of those players look to have incredible seasons. We didn't include them in the breakout prospects because they have already broken out, but some of the top talents in MLS for sure. Other takeaways, I thought Jacob Glesnes and Damian Lowe did a really good job at the back, containing the Fire's big money signing up top, Hugo Kuipers. He tore it up in Belgium, but a bit of a quiet debut in MLS. Obviously, he has a lot of time to integrate himself into the team, work with his new teammates, but a bit of a quiet start for him. And the last thing, I think Chris Brady, we need to mention him, one of our most promising keepers. I know he was getting pressured a lot, but he still does need to work on his distribution under pressure. He's kind of just kicking the ball out of bounds a lot, and I think he needs to work on being calm and composed. Despite having a lot of pressure, I know he can get to goalkeepers sometimes, especially young keepers, but he needs to be able to adapt to those situations and find a teammate.
Yeah, maybe it's the Chicago Fire school of goalkeeping, really, because Lenina has the same problems. But talking about the next game, it's Austin against Minnesota. I watched this game. I think that Austin is extremely underwhelming, really, especially with the time that they had during the summer, all the promise. But hey, Braden, we were there last year at the Nations League. What do you think? I have a bit of a soft spot for Austin now, but it wasn't looking good for them. What do you think their season is going to be like based on this match? Your main takeaways?
It sucks, honestly, because they have a great stadium, a great fan base, but one of the worst teams in the league. The only team to lose at home in match day one, which just says a lot about how much the team let the fans down. I know there was a lot of angry and disappointed, frustrated fans. Our guys at We Are Austin TV showed some post-match reactions, and fans clearly were not pleased. It was nice to see 19-year-old U.S. Youth National Team midfielder Owen Wolf picking up an assist, although he did not have the greatest of games, honestly. He was losing the ball a lot, but getting an assist at the end is a nice silver lining. Sebastian Driussi, Austin's best player, being injured, a huge blow for them. And honestly, I don't think they're going to be able to win any games, if any at all. With him being out, he's going to come back ASAP for them to even have a chance to start picking up some points. Another injury from the other side, Minnesota, Emmanuel Reynoso, their playmaker, their number 10, was out. And I think picking up a big win with their best player out is going to be huge for them. Timu Puki had a relatively quiet game, but it didn't matter. They ended up winning. And I think if his first full season is anything like last year, where he scored 10 goals in 19 games, he's going to be a contender for the Golden Boot. We've seen it at Norwich. He scores goals for fun, especially at lower levels like the championship in Norwich and the MLS. I think he's going to do just fine this season. And last thing from Minnesota's perspective, 20-year-olds, Caden Clark and Moses Steinman. I'm interested to see more from them. Clark had a promising cameo off the bench. Steinman was an unused substitute. They're both kind of in similar moments in their careers. They showed a lot of promise when they first emerged onto the scene, but kind of flamed out a little bit, bounced between a couple of clubs. Now they're kind of in a prove-it deal at Minnesota, trying to get themselves back on track, their careers back on track. They're still both only 20 years old. They have a lot of promise still, but I think it's going to be interesting to see how they're utilized this season and whether they can really turn it around.
Yeah, definitely. Now moving on to another club that has, as you said, it was a former promising player. Some people hate on him, some people don't. But Dallas, being led by the Pirate of the Caribbean himself, Jesus Ferreira, they got the win against the Earthquakes. The Earthquakes, which I think is one of the most boring teams in the league. But my apologies to all the Quakes fans, but it was 2-1 over in Dallas. And what did you think of that match, Braden?
Yeah, the fact that Dallas actually picks up the win here without Jesus Ferreira, like you mentioned, Peter Musa, their big money signing from Benfica, Alan Velasco, one of their best players, Argentina call-up as well, Marco Farfan as well, and even more players. The fact that they could pick up 3 points without all of these key players is big, despite it being San Jose. Like you said, they're not the best team, especially the game being at home. But it's an important 3 points for them. Dante Sealy, he was number 2 on my top 10 breakouts list, and he proved me right. Game winner in the 94th minute, great goal. And I think he's going to have a huge season for Dallas. And honestly, this might be a hot take. I think he's better than Bernard Kamunga, who has been getting a lot more attention than him. Got called up to the USMNT for Camp Cupcake. He's been with the Olympic team. I think Sealy is a better player, has a higher ceiling. And then Asier Illaramendi, you have to mention him, the veteran from La Liga. What a touch, honestly, to set up his brilliantly placed goal as well into the bottom left corner, just showing the Spanish class and technical quality that he still has despite getting up there in age. A real leader for this team. He's going to be in the midfield this season. From a San Jose perspective, I'm hoping that Amal Pellegrino can start next match. He absolutely tore it up with Bodo Glimt in Norway with 64 goals and 26 assists in his last 2 seasons there. Unbelievable numbers. And I've seen some of the highlights of him. He's an unbelievable player despite getting up there in age as well. I think he's 32, 33. I think he's going to have a huge impact on this team, especially giving Christian Espinosa, San Jose star player, someone to give the ball to, because he was quiet in this match. There was no one for him to really provide distribution to. And honestly, I don't want to overreact after one game, but I think San Jose could be in for a very long and frustrating season.
Yeah, I hope they're in for a very long, frustrating season. But moving on, staying in Texas, Houston, it was a tie against Sport Kansas City. Definitely any Kansas native over there right now will be happy with the Super Bowl, but at their soccer team, we have to admit it's not the most thrilling one. What did you make of this match, Braden?
I think it's clear that Houston's injury problems have affected them, both in this game and in the CONCACAF Champions Cup as well, struggling with St. Louis. Hector Herrera, their midfield, I think he's the club captain as well, but the star of the team, his injury is really big for them. Nelson Quinones as well. Those 2 players missing has had a big detriment to their team this season. Realistically, Houston, especially what they showed at the end of last season, winning the Open Cup and showing a lot of promise towards the second half of the season, they should be beating Sporting Kansas City at home. I think when they're fully healthy, they'll still be a very good team. It's great that they're starting and trusting 18-year-old midfielder Brooklyn Reigns. But honestly, I have to be honest, 2 games into the season, CONCACAF Champions League and this game against Sporting KC, he really hasn't looked good. Made the mistake that cost them the game in the CONCACAF Champions Cup against St. Louis at the end of the match. And this game as well, he kind of struggled to get into it. He is still young. It's good that he's getting chances, but I don't know if he's really cut out for this level yet. Maybe he needs to play MLS Next Pro for a couple of games. Steve Clark in goal in 2024, the 37-year-old is not the answer. He didn't even have a bad game, but they need to get a new goalkeeper for the future. Carrasquilla continues to be one of their best players. Please go to La Liga before it's too late. He's been so good for Houston and Panama. I want to see him in a better league, honestly. No offense to MLS, but he has too much quality to be playing here still. From Sporting Kansas City perspective, I really don't have a lot to say, honestly. I didn't really see much from them this game. Getting a point on the road is nice, but honestly, I don't think this team's in for a good season at all. I really still am struggling to comprehend how they snuck into the playoffs last season and even beat St. Louis in that 1 versus 8 matchup. I don't think they're going to repeat that success this season.
Yeah, and you mentioned them. Our next stop right here on the review was St. Louis. They had a really, really good season last year. A little bit disappointing, but it was due to the success that they set themselves up for in the beginning. Now this year they don't get the winning ways right off the bat. They did tie at home. And what do you think about that one, Braden?
Well, we'll start off with the positive. If any of the USMNT fans saw Folarin Balogun's goal for Monaco this past weekend, Samuel Adeniran for St. Louis City had basically the same thing, just from the other side, showing incredible strength on that solo goal. But I think that's really the only positive for St. Louis you can take away from this game. The fact that they sold Nicolas Gioacchini to Como in this January window is going to be a big loss for them. He had 10 goals last season. It still remains to be seen who's going to replace those goals. João Klaus, their other main striker, is going to need to stay healthy this season, because he was very good when healthy last season, but he did pick up an injury that made him miss some time. Aziel Jackson, the 22-year-old USMNT kind of midfielder, Camp Cupcake edition as well. I think he was pretty underwhelming, to be honest. He's still pretty young, but I think he showed a lot more promise last season. Hopefully he can get back to that form later on in the year. And then from an RSL perspective, getting rid of Damir Krylak, Jasper Lofelsund, Jefferson Savarino, and Rubio Rubin, which is 23 goals and 10 assists combined last season, all in the same window, and not replacing really any of them is a huge mistake. I think they're relying on the youth. Diego Luna and Phil Barajas have shown some promise. Luna's been a little ineffective, but I think with the lack of depth they have, he's going to have a lot of chances to improve on last season's 7 goals and 1 assist. Those two are really the shining lights of this team. And Matt Crooks as well. I'll give a shout out to him, signing from Middlesbrough. He looks like a pretty solid signing for them. Their only real marquee signing in the window, picking up an assist off the bench in his first MLS game. He'll probably be in the starting lineup next game after that performance. He's looked pretty good. Hopefully he can provide some service for Diego Luna as well.
Yeah, he's a very good player. I always rated Crooks when he was over at Boro. But now moving on to another match, getting away from these ties, the match that had the most goals, if I'm not mistaken. You mentioned Camp Cupcake a little bit before. Now Camp Cake FC got battered by the Timbers. Maybe that's football heritage, as Jose Mourinho says. It was 4-1 over in Portland. And what do you take away from this one, Braden?
Yep, the Colorado Rapids, and looking like a USL League 2 team. Name a better duo. Portland showing out. They always show out at home. They have great support from their fans. I think one of the best fan bases in the league. And it helped them in a big way here, getting 4 first-half goals. And I have to say, Portland's Anthony might be better than Man United's Anthony. Getting up a brace here, and I think he was one of the best players in MLS in general this match day. I'd honestly put him number 1. A lot of people will say Benteke because of his hat trick, but we mentioned earlier it wasn't that great of a hat trick, to be honest. You have to look at the whole performance. And Manchester United, if you need a new Anthony, here's one for you. He looked really, really good against similar quality opposition. I'm sure United would probably struggle against the Colorado Rapids. But Eric Williamson for the Timbers is back from his long-term injury with a bang, scoring just 9 minutes into the game, picking up an assist as well, just 29 minutes in. The former USMNT midfielder hasn't missed a beat. He looks very instrumental in the midfield for them. He's going to be one of their best players this season. And I'll give some praise to their new coach, Phil Neville, as well. I think a lot of people questioned that hire. He struggled a lot at Inter Miami. He was brought in basically because he's a friend of Beckham, let's be honest. But I think he's done a good job to start at Portland, bringing in a Canadian contingent at the back with Zach McGraw, Kamal Miller, and then in goal, either James Pentemis or Maxime Coupeau, who didn't miss this game due to personal reasons. But I think it was a really good idea having those 3 Canadians at the back. He was part of John Herdman's staff with Canada briefly, and I think that time there really helped the Timbers with a very solid core of the back line. And as for the Rapids, where do I even begin with them? So much hype. They had a great preseason, bringing in so many players, like you said, Camp Cupcake FC, bringing in Stefan Mihailovic Vines, and none of them seemed to click. Sam Vines continuing to have the unluckiest season of all time. We saw his struggles with Antwerp, his injury, getting left off the Champions League list due to an administrative error, and now scoring a horrific own goal in the game to make it 4-0 to Portland. And he should have scored one for his actual team, the Rapids, as well. In the 26th minute, he made a great run through on goal, but just couldn't finish the chance. Just continues to be so unlucky. Colorado, honestly, I'm still going to hold out a little bit of hope because they do have basically an entirely new team this season. They have a new coach as well, Chris Armas. I think he's a horrible coach, but he is new. It's going to take some time for him to build some chemistry with the new team. The new additions are going to need to learn how to play together in actual games instead of preseason. But I think once they figure it out, they could be a solid team. Maybe not as good as I originally thought, but it could be a respectable team. Zach Steffen as well, I have to mention, not the start he would have wanted to his MLS return. One of the goals, only one of them was really his fault, I think. But it's still, conceding 4 in the first half is not how you want to mark your return to MLS, especially being a big signing from Manchester City.
Yeah, definitely let a lot of people down with that game. Left me. It was kind of similar to this next game, although I will say that Cincinnati held up quite well with how the run of play happened over there. They were hosting Toronto, and I thought that Toronto actually looked pretty decent, but it was a 0-0 win. Would you say it's a fair result, Braden? What do you think?
Yeah, Toronto actually looked competent. which is a very new thing for me to see, considering how poorly the last couple of seasons have gone. I thought John Herman was an excellent hire for them, coming from the Canada men's national team, and he looks to have proved me right one game into the season, picking up a big point away to the Supporters Shield champions, who I thought were pretty underwhelming. I thought this game was back and forth, very even. A point apiece was very deserved. And I'll be the first one to say it. Reigning MLS MVP Luciano Acosta was very poor for Cincinnati. I would argue he held the team back with his ineffective dribbling and lack of physicality. It's not really his fault. I mean, he's 5'3". What can you do? But he went up against Davy Flores in the midfield for Toronto and just got destroyed every time. He's going to be a massive signing for Toronto in the midfield, something that they haven't had in a while. Replacing Michael Bradley, the USMNT legend, is going to be a huge upgrade for Toronto. He looks like a very, very solid defensive-minded midfielder for them. And speaking of washed players like Michael Bradley, Sean Johnson beating the washed allegations temporarily with 5 great saves, including on a Corey Baird bicycle kick attempt that would have been one of the goals of the match day for sure, but an excellent reaction save from Sean Johnson to keep them in the game. And from a Toronto perspective as well, they're very much in this game. Bernadeschi, if he can just be controlled, his attitude problems, if Herdman can manage him effectively, I think him and Insigne are going to be the fun duo that we all expected them to be when they originally came to MLS. And especially if they can pick up a 9 in the summer window, I think they're still in need of a real striker. They've had that issue for a couple of seasons now, but if they can finally pick up a respectable one, they could be a pretty fun team to watch this season.
Yeah, definitely. And there are a lot of forwards in Italy that are running down their contracts. So, they seem to like an Italian, so you never know. But moving on to the next game, Nashville against New York Red Bulls. A little bit underwhelming. The scoreline's 0-0. I actually thought this game wasn't bad to watch. The Red Bulls, in my opinion, should have won. But what do you think, Braden? What do you think about this match, Nashville? I don't know what their hopes are for this season, but main takeaways.
I completely agree. Even being in Nashville, this game was all New York Red Bulls. I have to say, missing Hani Mukhtar, Sam Surridge, and having Walker Zimmerman only be a substitute is obviously going to hurt for Nashville. That's probably their 3 best players that were absent or had a very limited role in the game. But yeah, Red Bulls, Emil Forsberg, the new signing, like we all expected, running the show. Everything went through him for the New York Red Bulls. He almost scored as well on a free kick, hitting the crossbar. I think a lot of chances were missed. Dante Vanzier was very unlucky not to score after Forsberg's fellow Swede, Noah Eli, also scored, making his MLS debut, put him through with an excellent through ball over the top. His poke hit the post. It really should have gone in. Just unlucky for him. The marquee signing from, I think, last season. The Edelman-Amaya duo, the 2 young players, obviously Daniel Edelman was the captain of the US U20 World Cup team from last summer. I think they look pretty solid as a duo in midfield. That's going to be a strong point, especially with Emil Forsberg in that midfield as well. It's going to be the core of the Red Bulls team, and I think they're going to be pretty good. From a Nashville's perspective, like I said, they're missing a lot of players, but they have some wingers, Jacob Schaffelberg, McKins Gaines. They're absolutely rapid, but they just need Hani Mukhtar to be back to get them in the right positions, open up space for them. Pace alone, without any distribution or other attacking threats, isn't going to cut it.
Yeah, definitely. And I think that's basically what we can Galaxy game as well. I thought that they have some depth over in the wing, but it was just a tie. But in my opinion, although it was a tie, it's a sign, definitely a positive sign compared to take away from this match that they're going to have a way better season than that one. Is that what you think as well, Braden?
Honestly, I thought this was the game of the match day. Despite only being 1-1, there was some higher scoring games, particularly Union Fire, Timbers Rapids. I thought this was a very entertaining game from start to finish. Who would have thought that with all these former Barca stars on Miami's side, that Ricky Puig from the Galaxy would have been the best one on the pitch? He absolutely ran the show despite missing a penalty, which was very disappointing. Great save from Drake Callender as well, who he needs a shout out. He captained Miami in this game, and without him, they definitely wouldn't have picked up a point. But Ricky Puig, like I said, he absolutely ran the show for the Galaxy. Every single attack went through him, and Joseph Paintsil as well on the right wing, switched over to the left as well at the end of the game once Gabriel Peck came on. He already looks way too good for MLS like I expected. He was showing out in Belgium. He's going to continue to show out in MLS. Was absolutely running circles around Sergio Busquets, drew that penalty that Ricky Puig did unfortunately miss. But he looks poised to have a huge season for the Galaxy, bringing something that they really needed. Gabriel Peck as well, like I mentioned, looked pretty lively off the bench, and if him and Paintsel are starting together next game, it's going to be a force to be reckoned with for whoever they're playing. But that being said, they do need to capitalize on their chances. Like I mentioned at the start of the video with the RSL game, it seems to be a theme for this season. Drake Callender bails out Miami, teams fail to capitalize on their chances, and then a little bit of Messi magic at the end of the game helps Inter Miami pick up the points they need. Messi and Alba are always on the same wavelength. What a duo goal between them two, just always understanding where the other one is in the right position at the right time. Messi was a little bit absent, I would say, in that game, but I mean, it's Lionel Messi. When he needs to show up, he showed up at the end of the game. Although I will say, I don't think that point happens without that second yellow on Marco Delgado that probably should not have been a yellow. It was a dangerous slide tackle. He probably shouldn't have made the tackle, but he barely touched Busquets. Shouldn't have been a second yellow. It's just a side effect of not having the real MLS referees, because they're still in a lockout and there doesn't look to be that many progress made from that aspect. But yeah, that closes out this very long video. Let us know in the comments what you thought about this, and you already take it away for the outro.
Absolutely. We appreciate all of you guys that are tuning into the channel for the first time. We see we have had a good exponential growth, and we just want to end this video with a thank you note to all of you guys. Please comment down below what's your MLS team and what did you think of the first match week in your opinion, and how far do you think your club can go? And let us know if you enjoyed this segment. We'll try to do this every week. I know it's long, but we're trying to do justice to our national league. It is, sadly, or not, the main league in the country. And we'll see what happens. Share, subscribe, and we'll see you next time.